She said my metal was just metal, and in that instant everything I'd fought for turned to dust in my own living room. Her words landed like a punch I wasn't prepared for, sharper than any shrapnel I'd faced overseas. The April sun filtered weakly through the blinds of my Chicago apartment, casting long stripes across the hardwood floors, blending with the faint hum of the refrigerator. My fingers lingered over the Medal of Honor, tracing every scratch, every dent, every subtle mark that told stories of firefights, sleepless nights, and brothers in arms I could never forget. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The medal rested on a faded velvet cloth atop my oak dresser, a place of pride and memory. Beside it, the $1,200 appraisal receipt lay crumpled. As though mocking me, my phone buzzed again. I glimpsed her text. Honestly, Dad, why do you even bother? It's just metal. The sting of those words cut deeper than any battlefield wound. I could almost hear her laughter echoing from the kitchen, punctuated by the soft clatter of her coffee mug as she left, a rhythm that would haunt me for days. I locked the metal away in my home safe, the click of the steel door resonating like a heartbeat of resolve. On the fridge, the museum flyer, spring exhibit on military valor, fluttered slightly from the vent, a quiet hint of what the world might recognize when she refused to. Her footsteps creaked against the floorboards as she departed, and I listened to them fade, imagining her dismissive smirk as she checked her phone mid-step. Photos of my old unit stared silently from the walls, eyes frozen in time, faces etched with determination, exhaustion, and loyalty. Each one seemed to ask, "Do you really let her words define your honor?" I felt my chest tighten. Memories of lost comrades, cold nights on patrol, firefights, and sacrifices. Ignored, belittled, dismissed flooded me. Her text pinged again. You should sell it at a yard sale. People would laugh too. I let it sit unopened. Every word was another spark feeding the quiet fire in me. I pored over the scattered documents, receipts totaling $2,800 for preservation, $1,500 for certificates of authenticity, photographs capturing the metal's gleaming surface under perfect light. Dates, details, and minor marks became my anchors. April 3rd for the last appraisal, March 29th for the restoration work. My pencil tapped lightly against the ledger as I reviewed emails from curators, subtle hints of potential interest and valuation hovering near $2 million. The museum flyer's red-circled dates stared back, foreshadowing recognition she could never mock away. I could hear the faint buzzing of my phone stacking notifications, emails, calendar reminders, minor tasks, but all threads forming the blueprint of what would become a meticulous, lawful reckoning. Every small scrap of proof, each photograph, each text, became a building block in a strategy that would not only restore my honor, but expose the audacity of her dismissal. I sat back in the armchair, coffee long gone cold, and let the silence settle. The floorboards whispered beneath the faint weight of the apartment, and I imagined the day her arrogance met objective scrutiny. The sparks of revenge, lawful, precise, undeniable, flickered brighter. My fingers brushed the steel handle of the safe, cold and reassuring, a reminder that what mattered most was locked securely, protected, and ready for what was coming. The sunlight dimmed, turning the apartment's gold glow into shadows along the walls. I pressed my palm against the safe one last time, letting the cool metal steady me. The betrayal had ignited something unstoppable. Every receipt, photograph, and email became part of the plan, a deliberate, lawful path to justice. She had called it just metal, but the world would soon see the truth. Not just metal, not just a relic. My honor, my story, my life, validated, respected, undeniable. And so, the first act of my reckoning began quietly in the heart of my Chicago home. She had dismissed it, but I knew better. I had the evidence, the plan, and the fire in me. This was only the beginning. I sank into my armchair, the weight of her words pressing down like the humidity of a summer Chicago afternoon. Just metal, she'd said, and every memory, every sacrifice, every sleepless night surged forward uninvited. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock, a metronome to my spiraling thoughts. Bills and receipts for the metal's preservation, $2,800, and certificates totaling $1,500 were scattered across the floor like fallen leaves, each one a reminder of care, attention, and a value she could never appreciate. I closed my eyes and let combat memories flood me. The night patrols in Kandahar, the chatter over radios that still echoed in my ears, the stench of gunpowder, the blood of friends I couldn't save. Every honor I earned had a cost, and she had dismissed it like a child brushing off a story she couldn't understand. Calls from former commanders came and went, their voices distant, almost ghostly. I barely registered them too, consumed by the sting of betrayal and the growing ache of humiliation. Scrolling through emails and collector forums, I found glimpses of validation, people who understood the medal's weight, the history, the pride, but it was small comfort. My daughter's dismissive texts kept coming, sometimes with emojis, always belittling. "You should sell it for scrap," one read. Another, "No one cares about your old stories, Dad." Even the coffee I'd poured hours earlier had gone cold unnoticed. The house seemed to mock me, each creak and whispering floorboard a reminder of her presence, even in absence. I thought of the museum flyer on the fridge, the curator's subtle hints from our emails, the valuation notes I'd scribbled in my ledger. All of it was potential leverage, but right now it felt like a faint flicker amid the storm of my shame. I stared at the locked safe across the room. The steel door glinted under the fading sunlight, indifferent to my despair, indifferent to her cruelty, and yet I drew a small measure of resolve from it. My pride, my honor, my legacy, none of it would truly vanish. She could mock it, belittle it, even try to erase it from her mind, but the proof was here, tangible, waiting. Receipts, photos, emails. They were silent witnesses to everything she refused to acknowledge. Her arrogance gnawed at me, but I also saw its flaw. A mind so dismissive, so smug, could be blindsided if approached correctly. The realization was bitterly comforting. I had a weapon stronger than anger or resentment. It was preparation, strategy, and undeniable evidence. And I would wield it with the precision honed over decades, not recklessly but methodically. As dusk turned the Chicago skyline to a haze of muted gold and gray, I cataloged my thoughts like I would evidence for a mission debrief. Each receipt, each email, each memory was a piece of a puzzle she could never fully comprehend. She thought my silence meant defeat. In truth, it was only the calm before the storm. I imagined her social circle, friends and acquaintances, slowly piecing together glimpses of her dismissal and my quiet response. The ripple effect, subtle at first, would grow. I would not raise my voice, not yet. Justice, I realized, didn't require theatrics. It required patience, precision, and proof. My resolve solidified in the dim light. The humiliation I felt now would soon transform into a meticulous plan, a series of lawful, undeniable moves that she could neither ignore nor undermine. The night deepened, and I finally allowed myself a slow exhale. Every tear, every pang of betrayal, every sleepless memory had a purpose now. She had underestimated me, assumed my silence equaled submission. But in that stillness I found clarity. My path was lawful, strategic, and inevitable. And when the time came, her laughter would freeze in place, replaced by the quiet weight of undeniable validation. $2 million worth, if the museum's hints proved true, and even more, the satisfaction of seeing honor recognized where it had been dismissed. I spread everything out across the dining table, receipts, emails, texts, photographs, all the tangible proof of a lifetime's worth of honor and careful preservation. Each item felt heavier than the last, weighted with memories, sacrifice, and now, betrayal. I tapped a pencil against the edge of a worn ledger, counting, double counting, verifying dates, amounts, and authenticity. $2,800 for preservation work, $1,500 for certificates, $1,200 for the original appraisal. Each figure a silent testimony to the meticulous care I had devoted to the Medal of Honor. The texts from my daughter lay open on the phone, her dismissive laughter captured in words and emojis, mocking what she had never earned. I scrolled carefully, taking note of every phrase, storing them mentally like ammunition. "Dad, seriously, it's just metal. No one even notices these old medals anymore. Why do you keep obsessing over this? I let them sit, unread and unresponded, while I focused on assembling a broader picture, a map of leverage that would become my strategy. I made calls to museum curators under the guise of hypothetical inquiries, gauging interest, subtly probing valuations without revealing my personal stake. One curator in New York spoke at length about historical significance, the rarity of medals of honor in private hands and market interest, carefully avoiding specifics yet hinting at potential valuations approaching $1.8 million. I noted every word, recording them in shorthand on the ledger. New York curator, historical rarity, high collector interest, $1.80, 2M potential. My army buddy Steve called me mid-afternoon. His voice, always calm, always precise, grounded me. Dean, you know this isn't just about her. You're proving the world wrong. Don't rush. Build the case. Collect everything. I nodded to myself, even though he couldn't see me, feeling the steadiness of his advice. His words reinforced the path I had begun to lay, methodical, lawful, deliberate. The daughter's arrogance was a fuel I couldn't ignore. She posted on social media, flaunting small victories, boasting about her social circle, blissfully unaware of the storm quietly assembling. I documented everything: screenshots, timestamps, and her social activity patterns, piecing together the indirect evidence that would later support public exposure and moral vindication. Every idle brag, every dismissive comment, every tiny probe into my affairs was catalogued meticulously. I could feel the apartment shrinking around me, the walls pressing with quiet intensity as I worked. The pencil tapping became a rhythm, a heartbeat syncing with my determination. The phone buzzed with occasional notifications, curators confirming potential appointments, emails from my lawyer noting proper steps for legal filings, reminders for meetings to verify authenticity, all forming a lattice of strategy and preparation. I photographed the metal under different lighting angles, capturing every engraved mark, every subtle imperfection that told its story. Each photo was a silent witness to my dedication, the sacrifices I had made, and the dismissive comments that now challenged my honor. I cataloged the photos with dates, times, and technical details. April 14th, 3:17 p.m. Natural sunlight, April 15th, 11:02 a.m. Artificial lighting, precision mattered. Every detail mattered. By evening, I had compiled a meticulous inventory: ledger entries, photographs, receipts, texts, social media records, curator notes, and email threads. It was a mosaic of evidence, a detailed blueprint for lawful vindication. Every item on the table felt purposeful. None were redundant. I could see the plan taking shape in real time, strategy unfolding across the dining room table as clearly as the sunlight fading through the blinds. I paused and leaned back, listening to the hum of the apartment, the faint rustle of papers as a draft from the window swept across the table. The calm was deceptive. Behind it, a storm of calculated moves and public validation waited, simmering just beneath the surface. I traced the steel edge of the safe, the secure vault that held the metal, feeling the cold reassurance beneath my fingertips. Every receipt, every email, every photograph would become part of a precise, undeniable narrative, proof that honor could not be dismissed, even by the people we love most. I imagined the daughter's eventual reaction: disbelief, frustration, and that first flicker of doubt. She had underestimated the quiet strength of preparation. The museum, the curator, the legal steps, they were pieces of a methodical puzzle that she would be forced to confront. And as I tapped my pencil against the ledger one final time, I felt the rhythm of control return. My plan was no longer abstract. It was tangible, deliberate, and unstoppable. Night settled over Chicago, and the city lights began to twinkle through the blinds. I stacked the receipts, texts, photographs, and emails neatly into folders, each labeled and indexed, ready for whatever steps were next. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sirens, the occasional passing car, they all became part of a soundtrack to the quiet assembling of justice. By the time I stood and stretched, I knew that the sparks of revenge I had felt in Act One were now a steady flame, fed by evidence, strategy, and unshakable resolve. The day's work concluded. but the plan continued to live and breathe around me. Each scrap of paper, every notification, every reflection of light off the metal would be a step toward proving what she had dismissed so carelessly. She had mocked it, laughed at it, treated it as trivial, but I had built a framework, a carefully documented testament to honor, preparation, and lawful vindication. The storm was gathering, and when it broke, it would be undeniable. The following morning, I woke to the faint gray light of a Chicago spring dawn seeping through the blinds. The apartment felt alive with quiet anticipation, a tension that buzzed softly like static in the air. I sat at the dining table, organizing the evidence from yesterday, receipts, emails, text screenshots, photographs, all meticulously filed. Today was about escalation. Every call I made, every appraisal I scheduled, every conversation I overheard would be a step in methodical, lawful revenge. I dialed the lawyer first. His voice was steady and precise as always. "Dean, make sure every step is documented," he reminded me. "Contracts, correspondence, even informal confirmations. They will matter if this ever reaches public scrutiny." I nodded. Scribbling notes in my ledger, April 17th, lawyer call, document verification, safe deposit confirmation. The act of writing, the careful cadence of my pencil against paper grounded me. Strategy required precision, no impulse, no error. Next came the curators. I framed my questions hypothetically, probing for interest and valuation without revealing personal stakes. "We have an artifact hypothetical Medal of Honor," I said, voice casual. "What would its valuation be?" Each reply was logged. Historical significance high, private ownership rare, market interest substantial. One curator even mentioned that a public exhibit would elevate its value and visibility. I noted April 17th, NY curator, market interest plus public exhibit influence. These hints, minor though they seemed, were crucial threads to weave into the tapestry of evidence. Meanwhile, I documented my daughter's behavior. Social media posts, text messages, even third-party chatter, friends commenting on her arrogance. Her dismissive remarks were quietly collected. Her skepticism about my intentions and her probing questions to acquaintances created a pattern that would later demonstrate her awareness and, inadvertently, her own involvement in the drama. Each observation was noted meticulously, time-stamped, and filed with the other evidence. I photographed the metal again under multiple lighting angles, adjusting lamps, natural light, and camera exposure. Every engraving, every subtle imperfection, every unique mark was captured in crisp, high-resolution detail. April 17th, 11:45 a.m. Natural sunlight, April 17th, 3:12 p.m. Lamp lighting, precision mattered. The smallest details could become decisive evidence. Collector inquiries, subtly placed, added layers of perceived interest, emails to potential buyers, inquiries under pseudonyms and conversations with other veterans associations suggested the metal's significance without alerting my daughter directly. The goal was never to deceive maliciously. It was to create a landscape where the world recognized value, so that when public exposure arrived, her arrogance would meet objective scrutiny. As I worked, I listened to snippets of overheard conversations in the apartment hallway, neighbors remarking on comings and goings, her voice faintly echoing in a call to a friend, questioning, probing. Each fragment became a puzzle piece. I recorded details discreetly in my ledger. April 17th, 2:30 p.m. Conversation fragment mentions my appraisal, expresses skepticism, subtle, almost imperceptible, but crucial to the overall narrative. By mid-afternoon, the apartment was a map of deliberate action. Receipts stacked neatly, emails cataloged, photographs meticulously labeled, calls logged with timestamps. I felt the rhythm of control returning. Every thread of evidence, every strategic move, every tiny observation formed a lattice of lawful vindication. The daughter's unease, though not yet apparent to her, was quietly building, her probing questions and social posturing unwittingly aligning with my plan. I paused to brew coffee, the aroma filling the apartment. The steam rose in a gentle swirl, mingling with the soft hum of my refrigerator and the distant city noise. I sipped slowly, appreciating the small sense of calm in the eye of the storm I had created. The Medal of Honor remained in the safe, glinting faintly through the locked glass of its protective case, a silent witness to the meticulous steps unfolding around it. Evening descended, casting long shadows across the apartment. I reviewed the ledger one final time for the day. Every call, every appraisal, every witness, every observation recorded and cross-referenced. This was no longer reactive, it was proactive. The groundwork for public exposure, for legal validation, for moral victory was set. Each precise action, lawful and deliberate, brought the eventual reckoning closer. I felt the embers of betrayal transform into a steady, controlled flame. And in that quiet Chicago apartment, I realized with clarity the power had quietly shifted. The next morning I woke early, sunlight spilling through the blinds, and felt the quiet anticipation pressing on me like a second skin. Museum evaluations and insurance appraisals were scheduled, and every call, every email, every note would be another brick in the wall of lawful vindication. The Medal of Honor remained in the safe, its polished surface catching the early light, almost as if acknowledging the day's importance. I made the first call to the insurance appraiser explaining the artifact's historical significance and requesting a detailed evaluation. We'll need photographs, provenance documentation, and previous appraisals, the appraiser said. I confirmed I had everything, receipts totaling $2,800 for preservation, $1,500 for certificates, and the $1,200 appraisal from last month. Each piece of evidence was catalogued with meticulous precision. I noted the call in my ledger, April 18th, 8:45 a.m. E-insurance appraisal initiated. Documents verified. Emails from the museum curator followed closely. We confirmed appointment times for the in-person evaluation. The medal's historical context is unique. Collectors will be highly interested, the curator wrote, unaware I had already anticipated the exact questions. I photographed the medal again, adjusting natural light and lamp angles. April 18th, 10:12 a.m. Natural sunlight, April 18th, 2:45 p.m. Lamp lighting, each image captured every engraving, every subtle imperfection. My ledger grew denser, every entry a silent testament to preparation. Meanwhile, my daughter's subtle probes began appearing. Friends reported her asking pointed questions about museum visits and potential valuations. Her curiosity tinged with skepticism. I documented it all, timestamps included, noting patterns: April 18th, 11:05 a.m. Social inquiry, museum exhibit, April 18th, 3:30 p.m. Text questioning friends on valuation. Her arrogance and ignorance of my careful planning were working against her. Every question she asked, every assumption she made was an inadvertent reinforcement of my strategy. I attended the museum meetings with a quiet, professional composure, blending humility and authority. The curator and appraisers examined the medal meticulously. Exceptional preservation, historical rarity, provenance intact, one appraiser remarked, documenting its condition. Market interest would likely approach $2 million in a public or private sale, the curator added. My chest tightened, a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The numbers were real, tangible, undeniable. Back home, I reviewed the ledger again. Receipts, photographs, emails, curator notes, insurance communications, all aligned perfectly. The daughter's attempts to undermine or distract me were futile. Her arrogance was blinding her to the growing magnitude of the plan she had underestimated. I sipped coffee, noting the steam curling in the soft afternoon light, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint distant sirens, all blending into the rhythm of meticulous preparation. By evening, the museum's verbal confirmation of a near $2 million valuation was recorded and filed. My ledger now included every call, every meeting, every document, every social probe, and every observer's comment. I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. Her disbelief, the tension simmering under her smug exterior, was almost palpable, even at a distance. The apartment felt charged, alive with the quiet energy of impending revelation. The sparks of betrayal that had ignited in Act 1 had now transformed into a steady, disciplined flame. Every legal, evidentiary, and strategic move was in place. The daughter's expected shock was no longer hypothetical, it was inevitable. The law, history, and meticulous preparation were all on my side. forming a lattice of undeniable validation that she could neither contest nor dismiss. As night fell, the city lights reflected faintly off the windows, painting long shadows across the apartment. I reviewed my plan one last time for the day, tracing the steps of public exposure, appraisal, and legal safeguard. The $2 million offer, though unofficial until finalized, was a tangible marker of vindication. I closed the ledger, resting my hands on the safe. The Medal of Honor remained secure, but its value, emotional, historical, and financial, was now a looming force, waiting for the moment it would assert itself in full. The week unfolded with a quiet intensity that pressed against every corner of my Chicago apartment. The museum had confirmed a near $2 million valuation for the Medal of Honor, and yet I waited. Waiting became its own kind of tension, the slow hum of anticipation threading through each day. I sat at the dining table, coffee steaming gently beside me, scanning emails from curators, lawyers, and collectors. Notifications pinged sporadically, but each one only reminded me how close the next stage was. My daughter's reactions began to manifest in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. She asked friends about museum valuations, made offhand remarks questioning the medal's importance, and even casually probed acquaintances who might know the curator. I documented every word, time-stamped every exchange. April 21st, 9:14 a.m. Social inquiry April 22nd, 3:27 p.m. Text to friend about appraisal rumors. April 22nd, 7:02 p.m. Casual conversation overheard mentioning museum interest. Each instance fed into the lattice of evidence, quietly reinforcing the inevitable outcome. I prepared for the press reveal with methodical precision. Photographers were briefed, curator confirmations secured, and legal advisors aligned. The apartment was quiet, except for the rhythmic tapping of my pencil as I cross-referenced dates, receipts, and emails. April 23rd, lawyer confirmed press permissions. April 23rd, curator verified display conditions. I felt the tension coil tighter with each detail reviewed, the anticipation building like the moment before a thunderstorm. Nightly, I documented mundane details with obsessive care. Coffee steam, the vibration of my phone at odd hours, the faint squeak of the floorboards, distant city sirens all became part of the sensory ledger, a subtle chronicle of both preparation and anticipation. Even the cold metal of the safe felt different now, a palpable reminder that what was contained inside would soon assert itself publicly. Despite the looming $2 million valuation, a flicker of fear lingered in my mind. What if something went wrong? What if the valuation was contested? Or if the daughter's manipulation somehow undermined the plan? I noted every potential risk in the ledger, along with contingency steps. Emails to lawyers detailed insurance protections, curator notes documented provenance, and photographs reinforced authenticity. Every piece of preparation minimized uncertainty, transforming anxiety into deliberate control. The daughter's arrogance, once blinding, was now a tool. Her casual dismissals, her probing questions, her social posturing, they all revealed her assumptions, and I cataloged them meticulously. April 24th, text intercepted. No one even cares about Dad's old medal. April 24th, friends report. She keeps asking about museum visit. Each entry reinforced her ignorance of the precision and evidence building around her. By evening, I allowed myself a brief pause, leaning back as the sunlight faded, the city skyline bathed in gold and gray. I sipped the coffee, the hum of the refrigerator punctuating the silence. The sparks of betrayal that had ignited months ago were now a controlled, steady flame. I could feel the shift, the power moving quietly, inexorably into my hands. I reviewed the ledger one final time before locking the apartment for the night. Receipts, appraisals, texts, emails, social monitoring, curator notes, all in order. Every possible challenge had been anticipated. The stage was set. The daughter's shock, her disbelief, her sense of inevitable exposure, all were waiting in the shadows, unseen but palpable. And I sat there steady, resolute, in the quiet knowledge that the moment of public validation was not just near, it was inevitable. The morning of the press conference dawned crisp and clear over Chicago, the sunlight reflecting off the museum's glass facade in sharp, almost blinding clarity. I arrived early, Medal of Honor secured in its protective case, and walked through the lobby with measured steps, the polished floors echoing softly beneath my shoes. Curators flanked me, legal advisors in tow, and photographers were already positioning themselves to capture the event. The tension was electric, a palpable current coursing through every corner of the grand hall. I could see her from across the room, standing stiffly near the entrance. My daughter had expected confrontation, theatrics, perhaps even public embarrassment for me. But what she didn't anticipate was control, poise, and undeniable proof. Her eyes darted nervously to the medal in my hands. The appraisal documents subtly displayed on the podium, the carefully arranged photos capturing every engraved detail. I noted her posture, her hesitation, the faint flush of discomfort creeping across her cheeks. The curator stepped forward first, his voice calm but authoritative. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We are here to present an artifact of immense historical significance, the Medal of Honor belonging to Mr. Dean, last name withheld for privacy, whose service and dedication exemplify courage, sacrifice, and commitment. Flashbulbs popped, capturing my calm expression, the medal gleaming beneath the lights. Every document, every appraisal, every photograph had been meticulously arranged to underscore its authenticity and value. I stepped to the podium, voice steady, and began recounting the medal's journey. Not a boast, not a plea, but a factual account of service, sacrifice, and historical importance. This medal represents decades of dedication, I said, glancing briefly at the appraisal documents beside me. It has been preserved, verified, and evaluated. Today, the museum has formally confirmed a valuation approaching $2 million, reflecting both its historical and monetary significance. The words were measured, deliberate, and deliberate. The room responded with murmurs, the flash of cameras punctuating the air, and a sense of gravity settling over everyone present. I watched her closely as the curator outlined the museum's process: preservation records, provenance documentation, appraisal letters, and expert verification. She shifted uneasily, her confidence slipping in real time. Questions from reporters were fielded expertly, the curator emphasizing the medal's rarity, the rigorous evaluation, and the legal safeguards ensuring authenticity. Every nod, every acknowledgement reinforced the evidence I had painstakingly assembled. The daughter's friends hovered awkwardly, whispering among themselves. Her social leverage evaporated in the room's bright light, replaced by uncertainty. I caught snippets of her whispered attempts to rationalize the situation. Maybe it's not worth that much. Maybe they're exaggerating. Each word, though soft, confirmed what I had anticipated: disbelief, unease, and the first cracks in her arrogance. Flashbulbs popped as I allowed the camera to capture close-ups of the medal, every engraving, every imperfection highlighted under optimal lighting. The curator gestured toward the documentation, receipts, appraisals, correspondence, all presented as part of the narrative of preparation and preservation. It was undeniable, objective, factual, lawful vindication made visible. By the end of the presentation, murmurs of respect, astonishment, and admiration filled the room. I returned to my seat, the medal secured safely beside me. The daughter's shoulders slumped, her gaze fixed downward. Her pride, once formidable, had been dismantled, quietly but absolutely. The $2 million valuation was not just financial. It was moral, historical, and public. Every receipt, every photograph, every legal consultation, every curator confirmation had culminated in this moment. As I stepped away from the podium, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not gloating, not revenge for its own sake, but the calm validation of preparation, discipline, and unwavering adherence to lawful, ethical action. The sparks of betrayal that had ignited months ago had now transformed into undeniable recognition. Public validation, historical acknowledgement, and moral clarity coalesced in a single moment, leaving no room for doubt. The museum hall gradually emptied, but the memory of the medal's gleam, the curator's validation, and the daughter's visible shock lingered in the air. I could feel the shift not just in the room, but in life itself. Control, once lost in a wave of dismissive words, had been regained. Every call, every appraisal, every witness had served its purpose. I had moved from humiliation to quiet, unstoppable authority, and justice had been achieved without cruelty, only truth. The day after the press conference, the apartment felt almost serene, though charged with a quiet sense of resolution. Chicago's streets outside hummed with normalcy, unaware of the storm that had passed within my walls and the museum halls. I sat at the dining table, surrounded by the ledger, receipts, emails, and photographs that had orchestrated the event, the quiet satisfaction of lawful vindication settling around me like a soft cloak. Friends and comrades began reaching out. Messages of respect, admiration, and astonishment poured in, people who had followed the medal's journey, some who had seen only glimpses on social media, others who had known the story intimately. Every note, every phone call reinforced the truth. Honor could not be dismissed, and preparation and evidence had carried the day. I recorded each message in the ledger, April 25th, 9:32 a.m. Text from old comrade acknowledging press coverage. April 25th, 11:14 a.m. Call from neighbor praising methodical handling. The daughter, meanwhile, withdrew from social circles, her pride wounded and her dismissiveness replaced by uncertainty. Reports from mutual friends indicated whispered conversations and hesitant explanations. She avoided public gatherings where the medal's coverage might surface, and her attempts to regain control were halting, disjointed, and largely ineffective. I noted each instance carefully. April 25th, 2:45 p.m. Friend report, daughter avoiding discussion. April 25th, 5:10 p.m. Pace social media, absence observed. Her previous arrogance now contrasted sharply with her cautious, tentative movements. I allowed myself a slow walk through the apartment, pausing at the safe. The Medal of Honor rested within, gleaming under the soft evening light. I ran my fingers over the steel, feeling the cold reassurance beneath my palm. Each receipt, each email, each photograph that had contributed to the public validation now seemed heavier with meaning, each a silent witness to the meticulous orchestration of justice. As the day progressed, I reviewed media coverage of the press conference. Journalists highlighted historical significance, careful preservation, and ethical presentation, framing the story as one of principled action rather than vendetta. I noted each article, time-stamped screenshots of online coverage, and recorded quotes in the ledger. April 25th, 6:02 p.m., Chicago Tribune. A veteran's honor preserved and validated with meticulous care. Each acknowledgement reinforced that the public and historical recognition had succeeded. Evening descended, the soft glow of streetlights casting long shadows across the apartment. I sipped coffee, the warmth grounding me amidst the quiet triumph, the daughter's social withdrawal, the acknowledgement from comrades, and the moral clarity achieved through careful preparation created a moment of balance. Every piece of evidence, every calculated step had led to this point. The spark of betrayal had been transformed into measured, lawful vindication. I allowed myself a brief reflection, eyes tracing the edges of the ledger, the photographs, the receipts. Honor had been restored, respect achieved, and the daughter's misjudgment had been addressed not with malice, but with undeniable proof. The storm had passed, but its effects, the meticulous documentation, the public acknowledgement, and the lessons in preparation and justice would remain. I leaned back, letting the quiet settle, confident that every detail, every entry, and every witness now stood as a permanent record. The following morning, I returned to the museum to finalize all remaining details. Chicago's spring air was crisp, the streets alive with the hum of everyday life, oblivious to the quiet victory that had unfolded. The Medal of Honor was carefully transported, secure in its protective case, and I walked alongside the curator and legal advisor, ensuring every step adhered to procedure. Today was about security, recognition, and permanence, the final threads of lawful vindication. Inside the museum, contracts were reviewed line by line. Legal language confirmed insurance coverage, provenance protection, and display conditions. Receipts, appraisals, and prior documentation were referenced to validate authenticity. April 26th, 9:12 a.m. Lawyer review, April 26th, 10:05 a.m. E-curator verification of documents. Every record, every signature, every timestamp reinforced the integrity of the process. Nothing was left ambiguous. Nothing could be contested. I watched the daughter from across the room. Her posture had shifted, tentative, cautious, her confidence eroded. She lingered near the periphery, unable to fully engage, clearly aware that her previous dismissiveness had been met with measured, undeniable authority. I noted her demeanor in the ledger, April 26th, 10:42 a.m. Daughter's observation, awkward, restrained, avoiding direct eye contact. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and it was now observable to any impartial witness. The curator guided me to the display vault, where the metal would be securely housed. Steel, glass, and controlled environmental conditions ensured protection. I ran my fingers along the edge of the vault, cold metal grounding me as I placed the metal inside. Every careful preparation, receipts, photographs, appraisals, curator notes, and legal oversight, culminated in this moment. Historical preservation, lawful protection, and public acknowledgement converged seamlessly. With contracts finalized, insurance confirmed, and security measures in place, I allowed myself a brief reflection. Friends and comrades had expressed admiration. The media had framed the story as principled and factual. Every piece of evidence I had gathered, texts, receipts, photographs, curator communications, was now validated and securely archived. April 26th, 11:57 a.m. Final contract signed, April 26th, 12:15 p.m. Insurance confirmation complete. Each entry ensured that the metal's history, value, and significance were preserved permanently. The daughter was asked to sign acknowledgement of her responsibility regarding family assets. She complied silently, the lesson absorbed quietly. Her previous arrogance had been replaced by acknowledgement, a necessary step in restoring balance and ensuring that respect for honor was no longer optional. I noted April 26th, 12:30 p.m. Daughter acknowledgement signed, verified. Walking out of the museum, the spring air felt different, lighter, steady, and affirming. The medal was secure, my honor preserved, and respect achieved without malice or theatrics. Every call, every appraisal, every photograph, every ledger entry had built toward this moment. I felt the satisfaction of lawful, deliberate vindication, a moral and practical closure that would endure. The sparks of betrayal that had ignited months ago were now extinguished, replaced with quiet authority, respect, and permanence. I sat in my study that evening, the Chicago skyline glowing faintly through the blinds, coffee cooling beside me on the ledger-strewn desk. Receipts, emails, photographs, and appraisal letters were stacked neatly, a tangible record of every careful step I had taken over the past weeks. The Medal of Honor rested in the museum vault, safe, secure, and publicly recognized. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension of months of meticulous planning finally ease, if only slightly. Memories came unbidden the day my daughter had spoken those words. Your Medal of Honor is just metal, echoing in my ears. The sting had ignited a quiet, disciplined fire within me, a fire I had fanned through precise, lawful actions, guided by evidence, legal consultation, and careful strategy. Betrayal had been sharp, but it had become the catalyst for unwavering resolve. I reviewed my ledger, tracing each entry. April 3rd, appraisal receipt, $1,200. April 14th, photographs of metal. April 17th, curator calls. April 18th, insurance evaluation. April 26th, museum contract finalized. Every number, every date, every observation had been part of a deliberate chain, a sequence that transformed humiliation into authority, dismissiveness into recognition. The meticulous documentation reinforced a simple truth: honor cannot be belittled when it is supported by proof and patience. I recorded a short message for my grandson, imagining his wide eyes absorbing my words. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. And remember, respect is earned by persistence, preparation, and the courage to uphold truth. The medal's journey, the betrayal, and the ultimate validation had taught more than pride. It had demonstrated that justice need not rely on malice, only on careful, unwavering action. Even the ambient details of the apartment seemed to echo this resolution. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint tapping of pencil against ledger, and the golden glow of the evening sun created a reflective rhythm, punctuating the lessons learned. I felt a sense of permanence, of clarity, that this story, my honor and my careful documentation would endure, leaving no space for her dismissive words to tarnish what had been earned. The daughter's behavior had shifted irreversibly. Socially withdrawn, cautious, and tempered by undeniable proof, she had learned without spectacle or harsh words the weight of respect. And I, sitting quietly among the evidence of months of deliberate action, realized that the journey from betrayal to validation was not just about recognition or monetary value. It was about clarity, moral authority, and the permanence of deliberate justice. I leaned back, tracing the edge of the ledger with a calloused finger, and whispered softly, more to myself than anyone else, "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." In that phrase lay every lesson, every strategic move, and every spark of dignity reclaimed. The medal was honored, my actions lawful, and the moral arc complete. The betrayal had sparked the fire, but methodical, ethical planning had allowed it to burn with clarity, leaving only justice and reflection in its wake. Days later, friends and comrades began visiting, each arrival carrying stories, laughter, and reflections that filled the apartment with warmth and memory. Chicago's streets glimmered through the windows, the spring sun casting patterns across the wooden floors, highlighting the ledger, receipts, and photographs that had orchestrated the medal's journey from dismissed metal to recognized historical treasure. Every visitor seemed drawn not only by curiosity but by a desire to witness the tangible outcome of years of sacrifice, care, and lawful, meticulous planning. Old army buddies arrived first, their faces weathered but bright with recognition. "Dean, you handled this perfectly," one said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Most people would have erupted, but you collected every scrap of evidence, every document, every witness. Respect." I nodded, letting the praise settle quietly, aware that the medal, now safely displayed at the museum, was more than a symbol. It was a testament to discipline, strategy, and enduring honor. Neighbors, too, trickled in, bringing small gifts and kind words. They had followed the press coverage, marveling at the $2 million valuation and the ethical way I had executed the plan. "You really proved it wasn't just metal," one neighbor said, eyes flicking toward the framed photographs and ledger stacked neatly on the table. Their curiosity, admiration, and quiet astonishment filled the space, reinforcing that meticulous preparation and lawful action could restore dignity even when personal betrayal threatened to unravel it. Throughout the visits, I recounted stories, the medal's origins, the missions it had witnessed, the sacrifices of comrades who would never see this day. Each story sparked a ripple of conversation, laughter, and reflection. The daughter, having observed from a distance, tentatively joined one afternoon, her demeanor cautious. Conversations were careful, respectful, and marked by a subtle acknowledgement of lessons learned. The social dynamics shifted naturally, boundaries restored without confrontation, her previous arrogance tempered by undeniable evidence. I documented every visit in the ledger. April 28th, 10:05 a.m. Army buddy visit, discussion of strategy and validation. April 28th, 2:15 p.m. Neighbor visit, comments on $2 million valuation. April 28th, 4:30 p.m. Daughter's tentative engagement observed and noted. Each entry reinforced the careful orchestration of events, ensuring that memory, acknowledgement, and reflection were preserved alongside the tangible evidence. The museum exhibit opening approached, and the medal's story was now part of public narrative. Visitors discussed preservation, appraisal, and historical significance, often referencing my meticulous documentation. I felt a sense of satisfaction watching the medal's journey extend beyond personal vindication, becoming a story shared, respected, and remembered. Each visitor's reaction validated the careful orchestration of months of planning. By evening, the apartment quieted, but the warmth lingered. The ledger, photographs, receipts, and appraisal letters were more than documentation. They were the scaffolding that had allowed a private honor to achieve public respect. Memories shared, lessons learned, and stories told created a living testament to discipline, patience, and methodical action. I finally allowed myself to sit back, eyes resting on the safe where the medal had been stored, reflecting on the journey from betrayal to public validation. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, reflecting off the polished wood floors and the stack of ledgers, receipts, and photographs that chronicled the medal's journey. The apartment was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint city noises outside. I sat at the desk, the ledger open before me, reviewing the sequence of events one last time. Every receipt, every photograph, every appraisal, every note from curators and lawyers told a story of preparation, patience, and lawful vindication. Neighbors stopped by mid-morning, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and admiration. One remarked softly, "So your daughter finally realized some metals aren't just metal." I allowed myself a quiet smile, the satisfaction not in gloating but in seeing truth recognized. Each observer's acknowledgement reinforced the permanence of what had been achieved. The metal's historical and monetary significance was no longer a private matter. It had become a shared testament to careful planning, honor, and diligence. I walked to the safe, tracing its cool steel edge with a calloused finger. Inside rested the Medal of Honor, gleaming under the soft ambient light, months of meticulous documentation, receipts totaling $2,800 for preservation, $1,500 for certificates, $1,200 for appraisal, emails, and photographs, had ensured it was recognized, secure, and respected. Each entry in the ledger represented a deliberate step in turning personal betrayal into public validation. The daughter appeared briefly, cautious but present. There were no confrontations, no lectures, only acknowledgment in her tentative smile and measured tone. Boundaries had been restored, lessons learned quietly through the undeniable power of evidence, methodical planning, and moral clarity. I noted the interaction in the ledger. April 30th, 10:15 a.m. Daughter acknowledgement. Respectful, reflective, no resistance. Even the smallest gestures mattered, signaling the culmination of months of strategic, lawful action. I reflected on the journey. The sting of her words, "Your Medal of Honor is just metal," and the fire they ignited. That fire had been carefully directed, disciplined by evidence, guided by legality, and executed with deliberate patience. The medal was no longer just metal. It was a symbol of honor, resilience, and strategic vindication. By afternoon, I reviewed media coverage one last time, noting repeated phrases highlighting meticulous preservation, historical importance, and ethical conduct. April 30th, 2:05 p.m. Article screenshot: a veteran's honor preserved and celebrated with lawful diligence. Each mention reinforced that the journey from humiliation to validation had been complete, irreversible, and respected. As evening settled over Chicago, I leaned back in the armchair, eyes tracing the lines of the ledger, photographs, and receipts. Coffee cooled beside me, untouched, the soft ambient glow casting shadows that stretched long across the apartment. I whispered quietly, almost to myself, "Some medals aren't just metal, and some lessons aren't just learned, they are earned." The medal gleamed silently, a witness to every calculated step, every piece of evidence, every ounce of patience that had transformed betrayal into lasting honor.